everybody, it's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor. Today we're going to talk about another difficult topic when it comes to healing from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, or narcissistic abuse. Those things are very, very similar in terms of the impact on our nervous systems, and that is of forgiveness. Ooh, you probably have seen a variety of different viewpoints out there. You're going to see different camps of you must forgive to be able to move on. No, you shouldn't forgive. You can move on anyways. And you're probably wondering, where do I fall on that spectrum? Because not only am I a trauma survivor and, had CPTSD, but also I'm a professional counselor. And so, yeah, professionals sometimes have a different idea of what people might want to do in these cases, but also I'm a trauma survivor. So that brings an added layer of kind of some firsthand experience with what this looks like on the inside. So I first like to start out with, I'm not going to tell anybody or any of my clients what they should and should not do. So I like to start with that because I know as a trauma survivor, what I needed first and foremost is somebody to empower me to use my own gut wisdom and intuition and, what I felt was safe and right for me. Instead of maybe whatever book knowledge or professional experience or personal experience that other person might have had. Because the reality is every single one of us is unique. And while one person may absolutely benefit from, say, forgiveness with an abuser, another person absolutely will not, and it will be a further violation to ask them to forgive. So it's not like a blanket statement where this is going to apply for everyone. So yeah, let's throw that right out the window. And as a side note, I generally don't like anything that makes us feel like we should, must, ought, do something in order to receive XYZ benefit. Ooh, no. I don't like shoulds, musts, or oughts because they're a form of control and like guilt and manipulation. So throw those out the window too. You and I, we're just going to talk real talk here. We want you to do what you feel is best for you, first and foremost. So knowing that, let me delve into this topic a little more deeply. I'll give you what it looked like for me. So my personal experience with the topic of forgiveness and closure. And then we'll also talk about, I think when forgiveness and closures can be like a negative thing and maybe we don't want to use that. Or maybe, for example, when it's actually a positive thing and we can actually use it to move on. So we'll talk about both options a little bit more in depth. So my first thought on forgiveness, and especially those truisms out there that are like, oh, you must forgive in order to move on, and forgiveness is next to divinity, and it's the holiest thing you can do. Pause. Let's pause on that. That may be true for some people, but it's not going to be true for all of us. Telling people they must forgive somebody who has massively harmed them is a form of guilt tripping and gaslighting. Like, you're not even acknowledging the terrible damage that has been done to this human being. In other videos, I've talked about abuse is soul murder. Like when we're children and we grow up in a family that inherently doesn't love us and abuses us and abandons us, that's not love. And that's going to do some serious damage on a spiritual and emotional and psychological level. And by just telling people to forgive, you're rug sweeping. Stop it. Don't rug sweep people. No, it's not good for us. First and foremost, we need to have the abuse recognized for how harmful and damaging it was. It was soul murder for many of us. And so you can't just rug sweep and say, well, let's just forgive and move on, right? Put the past in the past. No, because what that does is it absolves the abuser of accountability. And forgiveness without accountability is not a smart move. That's not a smart move. We don't want to just forgive and let the abuser off the hook, because then the abuser gets to repeatedly harm us. In fact, that's what many of us have done throughout the years, is we have attempted to forgive the abuser and put the past in the past and move on. And lo and behold, if somebody is truly an abuser, they just keep repeating the same behaviors. So I've talked about that in some of my other videos too, right? A sure sign you're dealing with somebody who's highly disordered is if you ask nicely and set boundaries nicely, like, please don't do XYZ. I find that harmful. And they keep doing it. Yeah. So it's not like you haven't actually had or tried to have rational discussions with abusers. Many of us have tried to have that and to no avail. Like, again, boundary settings, healthy communication, being assertive, that doesn't work with truly disordered people. They're in a totally other spectrum in terms of, their ability to have insight and accountability. It's not going to be there. So telling somebody to forgive somebody who is never really going to be accountable is not a smart thing or a healthy thing to do. So please don't do that to other people if you've ever done that. Yeah, don't do that. It's not helpful. And yeah, I like to say a true apology. So let's talk about like what a real apology would actually look like. So here's a healthy person apology. Okay, so this is what it should look like in order for forgiveness to happen. Say I have inadvertently said something that was really hurtful, and you were trying to explain to me that I hurt your feelings. Okay, here's what a real apology looks like. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that would have that effect on you. I apologize. Please forgive me. It won't happen again. I'm so sorry. And then it doesn't happen again. Yeah, that's what a real apology looks like. Not only are they truly sorry, they're expressing remorse, they're expressing understanding, they're saying they're not going to do it again, and then they don't do it again. Yeah, change behavior. Change behavior indicates somebody is being accountable and they get it. So if you have somebody who has been accountable, really apologized, and is not doing the harmful behavior again, that is your sign that proceed with forgiveness. If that feels natural and right to do so, proceed with forgiveness. That's great. You're dealing with somebody who actually has the ability to have insight and compassion and empathy and understand that their words or actions have harmful consequences. And they're able to respond to your dialogue about feelings and how something impacted you. Unhealthy people will not. They will not be able to have these conversations. And as you probably are well aware of, I've talked about in some of my other videos, when we go no contact, it's usually after a very lengthy period of attempting to have our needs met and healthy communication and dialogue and trying to remain safe, and it just isn't possible. All right. And another reason I don't like to force people to forgive before they're ready to is, to me, it comes off as a bit controlling. Like, really, what it comes down to, and again, I talked about this in one of my other videos of basic human rights, that we all have basic human rights. And one of those basic human rights is to have our needs, feelings, ideas, perceptions, personhood respected. Oh, we have the right to be respected as a human being. And so when you're telling somebody to just carte blanche forgive an abuser, you're not respecting the victim's rights to be respected and to be treated humanely. So that's, again, rug sweeping and victim blaming and putting the responsibility back onto the victim to do more work in the relationship. No, the victim already has done too much work in the relationship. Stop making victims responsible for abusers' behavior. We are not responsible for abusers' behavior. And quite frankly, if you're still telling victims they need to forgive, you're putting the onus of responsibility onto the victim, and the abuser still has control. They still have control. They get to sit back and abuse repeatedly and without any accountability. And it's still controlling the victim and impacting the victim's emotional world and psychological world and physical safety and all of that. No, we don't want to give abusers more control. We want to empower victims to take back control of their own lives and to be able to protect themselves and to feel safe. And so that's why, again, another reason, don't tell victims to forgive. And then here's another aspect too. So the aspect related to religiosity and religion, and like, what does religion say about forgiveness? So this is where I see a lot of victims with complex post-traumatic stress disorder really suffering because they're experiencing all sorts of guilt related to their religious beliefs about not wanting to forgive the abuser. Like, well, that makes me a bad person now because I'm not forgiving them, and the Bible says I should forgive. Again, throw that out the window. That is, again, it puts so much more responsibility on the victim than it does the abuser. How about we start talking about maybe don't go around abusing and harming other human beings. Instead of carte blanche, you should just turn the other cheek, because that's not helpful. That's not helpful to victims, and it re-traumatizes them, and it disempowers them, and it takes away their voice. And again, we're just taught to be doormats, and let's just let people abuse us. No. So those religious mantras and tropes, I personally do not like. I do not support them, and they're not helpful for victims' healing. Uh, you know, one of my favorite spiritual teachers. If you've ever heard of her, she's a wonderful Buddhist nun. Her name is Pema Chodron. And I love the way she looked at this particular concept. So she had somebody at one of her teaching seminars where a person got up in the audience and they asked her, isn't it like the most spiritual or godly thing to do is to forgive somebody who is repeatedly victimizing you or abusing you? Like, shouldn't I technically do that to be spiritual and loving? And how Pema Chodron described it was really validating to me as an abuse survivor as well. She said, no, actually, that at least according to the Buddhist philosophy, that by setting boundaries and getting away from the abuser, that what you are actually doing is not only are you saving yourself and preventing more harm to yourself, which is the most loving thing that you can do actually as a victim, is to love yourself first and to protect yourself first, but also you're actually helping the perpetrator, because now you're not allowing the perpetrator to harm you anymore. And at least in the Buddhist, religion or philosophy, that is preventing them from accruing any further negative karmic retributions for harming people. So I guess you could extrapolate that even possibly to the Christian faith as well, that this person is no longer allowed to sin against you, and that actually is a loving thing to do, to prevent somebody from accruing more negative debts of sin or harm or karma or whatever you want to, whatever language feels comfortable to you. But at any point, that at any rate, that the abuser is not allowed to harm you anymore. And actually, by not allowing the abuser to harm you anymore, not only are you loving yourself, but it's actually a loving act towards them. And that hit me profoundly, and I liked it. I like that one a lot. So that one really helped me to leave behind some of the religious tropes that are out there that was harmful to me and to many of my clients, that you must forgive, otherwise you're not a good spiritual person. No, actually, by protecting yourself and keeping abusers away from you, not only are you loving yourself, which is the correct thing to do, but you're also loving them because you're preventing them from harming you. And that is a compassionate, loving response to persons who cannot stop victimizing other people. And then another aspect, I think, of forgiveness, which a lot of us trauma survivors have to watch out for, is that it can be a form of people pleasing. So again, I've talked in my other videos about wounded, traumatized parts, protectors that take over. Again, I'll link below my video to IFS and complex trauma and some of my other videos, because really, when you're talking about a people pleasing part, that's a part that's trying to protect your vulnerable, wounded child parts, right? By just giving in to the abuser and keeping them happy. So again, by telling victims that they should just forgive the abuser, what you're doing is denying their ability to move from authentic self. So that authentic, wise adult part of us recognizes that we have the right to be treated respectfully, and that we are allowed to protect ourselves through, like, no contact, for example, or minimizing communication with the abuser. But people pleasing or wounded parts don't, right? They're the ones that keep doing the roles that they do to try to protect the system from emotional harm and negative behaviors. And people pleasing is one of those. So for sure, I can't tell you how many times I myself look the other way when somebody harmed me and just let them repeatedly harm me, because it was a people pleasing part that was like, just please love me. Please love me. Please accept me. I'll twist myself into all sorts of pretzel knots just to keep you happy, if you will just love me. But now I realize, so the healed part of me realizes, I was always worth more than the abuse I was accepting. I was worth more than that. And I should never have put up with the behaviors that I used to put up with, that I wasn't loving myself by putting up with those, abusive behaviors. So really, again, it goes back to that self-love. When you have self-love and self-leadership, that wonderful IFS quality of self-leadership, you no longer allow abusers to abuse you, because you recognize your inherent worth as a human being. So definitely forgiveness and self-worth, go hand in hand. And when you have love for self and respect for self, you don't tolerate abusers anymore. And you don't just look the other way and forgive quickly and people please and all of that. You stop doing that. You recognize you have worth. And so really what healthy forgiveness looks like, maybe actually, might be compassionate towards yourself. Because I think when we do this healing process as complex trauma survivors, what changes inside of us is that love for self. And not only do we have love for self, but then we can recognize we deserve our compassion first and foremost, definitely ahead of the abuser. But our compassion needs to be directed at ourselves because we didn't know any better when we were a lot younger, right? We were just stuck in a lot of those survival parts and trying to stay safe with people who had more power than us and who had negative influence over us and controlled us and whatnot. We were just trying to stay safe. So compassion, first and foremost, should be directed at ourselves. We deserve it more than anyone, actually. And quite frankly, forgiveness is not the only road to healing. In fact, there's many roads to healing. And as I said, unless the person is actually accountable and remorseful and is a genuine apology with changed behavior, they really don't deserve forgiveness. There is something to be said for natural and logical consequences of repeated harmful behaviors is that you don't get to be around the person that you're harming. None of us would expect to repeatedly harm another human being and then just expect to be in their lives. Like, that is highly irrational and disordered. Of course not. So there are some natural and logical consequences to being an abuser. And one of those is you lose the relationship with the person that you want to be around. They're not going to want to be around you. That's what happens. So no contact, low contact, gray rock, etc. I talked about that in some of my other videos. A lot of those are natural and logical consequences to deal with abusers. Because, we are going to wise up someday. We are actually going to love ourselves someday. And then we're not going to tolerate the disrespect and, quite frankly, the unloving behavior that we put up with for far too long. So I want to give you permission now to love yourself enough to say no to people who have harmed you. You are allowed to love yourself. You are allowed to show yourself compassion first. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are worthy of respect. You are worthy of respect. And if somebody has repeatedly harmed you, you have the right to stop the abuse by either setting boundaries, going no contact, blocking them if need be, whatever it takes for you to have some safety to try to heal. So this is another important thing I want to point out. In order to heal, we actually have to get space from the person who has harmed us. That is so important. You can't really heal in the environment that broke you. So if you're still in contact regularly with the abuser and you're still in the environment that broke you, you're going to still keep getting triggered. You're going to still have those safety cues being fired off that says I'm not safe, and you're still going to have parts that are active and doing what they're doing to try to keep you safe. So you really cannot do this type of healing if you're in the environment that broke you. You really have to go no contact, at least for a little period of time, to let your nervous system kind of settle down. And also to be working, for example, with a wonderful trauma therapist so that you can begin to build your identity and self-worth and self-esteem and undo the brainwashing and the gaslighting and all of that, to really have that strong identity, to know who you are as a human being. That's really important too. And you can't do that again if you're still in the environment that is harming you. That really happens when you get enough space away from the abuser. And then you can really start to learn who you are as a human being and understand your worth and value as a human being. And then no longer tolerate disrespect and abuse. So I hope that this video has been helpful. I'll have other videos, no doubt, related to similar topics. Closure is another one that I want to do a whole other video on. How do you get closure? When you probably will never get an apology from your abuser. So that will probably be the next video that I'll do. And I hope that this was helpful for you. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel. Your support means so much. And I'll see you guys again in the next video. Take care.